to the open meeting law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 18 of the Governor's June 16, 2021 revised order. This meeting, the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and remote. In-person attendance will be limited to school committee members, superintendent, and district school administrators. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. However, the meeting may be accessed remotely through Zoom or Facebook. Agenda items, those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Those items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and the school committee recorder and will be broadcast. Once transcribed and approved, minutes will be made public and posted to our website. So I am going to start with attendance. So, and I would ask, especially school committee members who are here, to speak loudly and try not to mumble as I do, because with a mask on and through the owl, it is somewhat hard to understand. Vincent? Jason St. Peter?
Aye.
Sean Stephen?
Yep.
Thank you. Molly Thomas? She's not on. Bill Fields?
Here.
Diane Singer?
Here.
Corey Sprague?
Here.
And Rich is not here, and I am present. So we'll start out. We have in our packet the July 29th, 2021 and August 10th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
So I have a motion by Sean and a second by Bill. Any discussion? All votes in virtual meetings are roll call. So, I'm not going to call on the people who weren't here. If someone sees them jump on, let me know. Jason?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
And I, it's unanimous. And we'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the good news and actually start with the school principals. We're almost through our first 2 weeks of school. People have been working really hard. We'll start with Kate Retzel and then go to Ben and then Christy. So
They may want to come up and sit at the end of the table when they're speaking, just to be heard better.
okay, great.
Right here.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
I think so.
That should fit.
All right. So, week 2 has arrival and dismissal procedures getting quicker and quicker, which is good. The staff and student have definitely embraced the COVID protocols very well. Just so that everyone's aware, we started off with pretty much similar to the spring protocols, and as time goes on, we'll reconsider little bits and pieces of that that we might be able to loosen at times, but we definitely want to know about community spread before we make any major changes. Each of the grades has taken advantage of their first weekly community connections period. This is our great team of specialists' answer to COVID not being able to have a lot of community gatherings. What they've worked out is a way that grade levels can meet together. So at least we have a grade level celebration, and one that is consistent across the grades. So every grade is getting the same work. So this first week they did movement, a celebration song, reading of the book, All the Places You'll Go, and ended with a mindfulness activity. So that's the general agenda for those periods. This week they worked on cards of thanks for the emergency workers in our community. And also they're going to be working on their own hopes and dreams, but also working up to what is usually a Moneybrook tradition, which is making pinwheels to celebrate the International Peace Day. So they're gonna be doing some hopes and dreams rocks and making a mandala out in the front, and also doing the pinwheels. We have had our demonstrations of stringed instruments as well as band instruments. It looks like we have about 28 string students that were third graders. Hopefully they'll remain so as fourth graders, which leaves us about the same number of grade 4 who might be able to take up a band instrument. We're working on that. We're planning a special celebration for students on their day when their band instruments arrive. We believe that creating a learning community of musicians in elementary school is only going to lead to more and more movement up through the grades. We are planning an open house of sorts in person. It won't be a huge community event. Again, it'll be broken up into similar to what happened on the meet and greet nights, where families really appreciated the opportunity to be able to be in their children's space with them and be able to show off what they're working on. So we're working on that schedule now. It looks like it will be September 29th, which is a Wednesday night. And lastly, we've been hearing a lot about some plans for field trips and requests for class pets. So those to me are signs that things are getting a little normal again. So I just wanted to share those with you.
Great, thank you, Kate.
So it's exciting to be back at school. Middle school is off to a great start. Of course, our most important students are fifth graders coming in to start with us for 4 years. It's been a really great start for the fifth graders, just being able to start in person. Fifth grade team just does a wonderful job of just building up the culture and making sure the kids are, working with the school in the ways that we want to. It's a long haul for 4 years. So what I've been loving actually is this fifth grade group, because they've just been out of school for so long and then came back at Muddy Brook. We got a lot of actually new students coming in, so it's a really nice mix. I get to do it then during lunch and recess, and it's really a wonderful group. Ask lots of questions, decide to have a lot of fun. It's really just wonderful starting the year with them, full-time, in person. We did several family forums, if you remember my mentioning right before school starting, one for all families in English, which was well attended, but then also we did one in Spanish. We partnered with Volunteers in Medicine to do one fully in Spanish, and really did some good outreach to immigrant families and Spanish-speaking families. Just felt like we were really bringing all families together for the start of school. And we've had a really great launch. Fifth grade is deep into academics already, which is really good. The fifth and sixth grade, we have our fifth academic period, which is always an enrichment and support period. We're calling it What I Need Now. It's something you made up. It's a pretty classic elementary and middle school model, but it's really focused on academic support and executive functioning. So really teaching kids the skills that they need to work. So the teachers are really excited about it. One of the activities they're doing in fifth grade, which is wonderful, is they're sending home like elementary classrooms do. What did we do this week? But the students are writing letters home to their parents also at the end of the week to kind of explain what it is that I did this week. It's a really nice development. The kids are really into it. The parents seem to be responding really well. Sixth grade is really pushing an academic skill component. Seventh and eighth grade looping is a great start because we've been able to hold a lot of our students, our seventh graders last year, and now eighth graders. So even though it's been quite a difficult 7 years with COVID, these students are really in eighth grade have just jumped right back in with the same teachers, and we've done a lot of work to really just build a culture around what we call Team Orange and Team Green, and the two different seventh and eighth grade teams. Really just building up a culture where the eighth graders are also helping the seventh graders really understand what it means to be middle school in these upper grades. Some other really exciting developments. We had the New York Times visit us today. One of our programs, the Autism and Behavior Center, ABC, just is a well-known program, and there was a lot of interest by the New York Times to do a story across the country on the opening of school. And they came and visited us today and saw some of the students who were supported by the program, but also the general students. But it just felt really good to be recognized for something we're doing really well, which is inclusion and making sure that all students are part of programming no matter who you are. So it was just a lot of fun to have there was a big buzz in the school around it. And some other exciting stuff that's going on. We have a nice pilot bilingual English and Spanish program going on in 7th grade, where they're trying to figure out how to mesh inclusion with English as a second language, immigrant families who speak Spanish, as well as many of our students. Over half of our 7th and 8th graders choose to take Spanish as the world language. So there's a real mix between the ESL teacher, the English teacher, and the Spanish teacher. So that's a lot of fun. And also there's a really interesting activity going on with the math teachers. We have the Teachers Development Group, which is a math professional learning experience around math instruction, but it's all really about actually math reasoning and the language you use for math, something you can use from kindergarten all through calculus class. But the teachers, the math team, which is really exciting on their own, have really taken it on themselves to really push this idea of integrating the language of mathematical reasoning into classes, and we jumped into it and into that with that. I really could go on, it's a lot of fun, but the big thing is the tone in middle school is we jump right back in, we're really enjoying ourselves. Crew is the core of our program, and we really carved out a half hour in the middle of the day where everyone is in crew and talking about building culture, having important conversations, just having fun. So there's this real mix of coming back and enjoying being together, being serious about building community, and jumping right back into academics, which is really cool. It's crazy, year and a half. So,
Great.
good.
Thanks, thanks. Any questions for Ben? Okay. And Christy.
Hi, everyone. It's exciting to be back with you all in person, or most of you in person. And it's exciting to be back in school with all of our students in person. A few updates. I'll start with some of the logistical items. Like Katie, we have gotten to a point where we worked out the bumps, particularly with our dismissal procedure. We did have some changes around that, and it caused some confusion when we opened, but we have rerouted parent pickup and shifted where the buses are, and the past 3 or 4 dismissals have gone very smoothly, so I'm excited to report that. We've also returned to our 8-period schedule in the school day, and I think students are adjusting to having the full 8 periods with a more traditional high school experience than we were offering last year. Study halls, we're running 3 days with short blocks and 2 days with long blocks. We are also continuing our work with advisory, and when we brought students back in for the first day of school, we had an extended advisory period, which was particularly nice for our 9th grade and our 10th grade teams. The 9th grade did a really good job doing an orientation during the opening advisory, and the 10th grade brought the whole 10th grade class together because, of course, last year they missed their orientation, and so the 10th grade team did a really good job supporting them. Yesterday during the advisory, the 9th graders all got their monument t-shirts handed out to them because they arrived, and they gathered for a class picture, and I think the 9th grade team is doing a really good job, both in terms of the delivery of academics and the work that they've done, and in terms of team building and really helping the class feel like a cohesive whole. That was something that was really missed last year. So I'm excited about that. We also have good news on grant fronts, 2 of them. We received a $75,000 grant, the Skills Capital Grant, and that's to support the purchase of equipment connected to our advanced manufacturing pathway. So that's exciting because that space is developing. Through the pandemic last year, we actually took down a wall and opened up space, added a whole bunch of 3D printers to that program, and the $75,000 is going to help us purchase a CNC machine later this year that will go in that space as we continue to develop that program. And we also received the BAR Foundation grant. We are a part of the Catalyzing Change group, and that is to continue our work in redesign that we were doing with the Mass Ideas grant. We will be focused primarily on the academy model connected to proficiencies. that the ninth grade team has been working on planning and rolling out this year, and also continuing our work in advisory and governance. And we are in the process of shifting our governance, particularly around the student side, to improve student voice and representation in the decision-making process of the school. So there's a lot going on, and it's really exciting. We also welcomed the largest cohort of new teachers to my unit this year that we've had in a long time. Peter Polkowski, the assistant principal, and I have been working really hard to get out in classrooms, particularly visiting the new teachers, but really visiting all of the classrooms to see what's going on. And there's great work, kids in teams working together in groups, which is nice to see. And it's wonderful to welcome new young teachers onto the staff. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So I'd just like to reiterate what a big deal it is that Christine and her team pulled off this bar grant. So Mass Ideas was working last year on ninth grade. The bar grant's $300,000 to work on 10th grade. Until recently, bar didn't fund things in Western Massachusetts that were just specific to the Boston area. So it's a really big deal. And there's one other piece in it, which is around trying to increase parents' voices in policy and decision-making, which is also part of the governance thing. So the really nice thing is all the things we're working on are aligning with each other, and it's not by accident, it's quite intentional. So I'm really psyched about that. So really well done. Question, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. You talked about the efforts on the ninth grade team.
Yes.
Kind of onward, bring them together, and you also alluded to the fact that the 10th graders never got that. So are there similar efforts in place to kind of make sure that they get?
Yes, the 10th grade team of teachers has also been meeting. Like I said, opening day, they did have an activity for them. The 10th grade team decided very intentionally not to do the exact same activity that the 9th grade team was doing with 9th graders, because in fact they are 10th graders, even though they missed the 9th grade experience. So they brought the 10th graders together, but just did some different activities with them as a team.
The schedule, and you're seeking input.
The development of it was a good process. We had a subcommittee from our teacher leaders that we refer to as team coordinators. At the high school, we often call them department coordinators because they're connected to the departments. The subset of that group was meeting and invited student representatives into the process. I gave them some very specific parameters that had to be included in the schedule. So like, for example, I said there had to be more than one 30-minute advisory a week. So we landed on a schedule that has 2. Honestly, I think in the future we might be looking at a schedule that has more, but for this year, that's the schedule we landed on. I also said there had to be long blocks built into the schedule somehow, so that science labs and our CBTE programming could have longer classes. There were 3 schedules proposed by this group. The place where I think we had a little bit of a misstep last year was when we shared it out with students. I don't think we gave enough time for students to actually respond to the survey where we asked for their input. We did use the input we got, but we only had probably about a third of the students respond to the survey. So there were some students I know that were frustrated that they felt their voices weren't heard. And we recognize that, and if we go through another scheduling process, I'm sure we'll be trying to make an effort to include more voice. I think
when we were having those discussions, there was kind of an understanding that this year would be a bit of a transition back into our 8-period schedule. And so we settled on one that was really straightforward, and I think it's been working out really well with plenty of time for science classes. Like all of the AP sciences, which have 2 credits, the way it works out, you get more than an hour every day, so there's plenty of time.
Good, okay, thanks. So, Zoe and Julian, do you have some student member items to share?
Yeah, a lot of it we had written down was covered by Ms. Farina, but I think what we can do is sort of just provide a little bit more in-depth student perspective. Once again, just to echo, I think it's been said a lot, but it's really important. There is just an excitement to be back, especially to be back full-time, although it is school and it's often dreaded. I do think people just enjoy being in the building and seeing their friends and going to sports practices and going out to our upcoming football game tomorrow night, which I think is going to be a big deal. Hopefully we win. I think we have a lot of promise. Speaking of athletics, as you can see with Zoe, we had a 9-school cross-country meet.
Cross-country invitational happened today, yeah, so on the agenda, we're asking to make official our second cross-country coach, because we have the biggest girls cross-country team in our school's history, which includes, we've got 8 sophomores this year compared to the 1 freshman we had last year, and we brought on 5 new freshmen. So the 9th and 10th graders are really, I think, engaging in the schoolwork and really engaging in extracurriculars super fully, even though there was that fear that we had kind of lost them.
Yeah, and I think that just ties in directly to what Ms. Farina was speaking about. It sort of commend the teachers for, there was that fear that the previous 9th grade, the now current 10th grade might have sort of lost out on that connection and being part of our school community. But I think just through the example of cross-country, that fear is really not one to be worried about. Everyone is really united as a group. And although we can't all be together in the auditorium as a whole school, there's definitely a feeling that we are all one school, and that people are sort of really getting the experience that they missed out on.
Yeah, like Ms. Trina said, we have brought a bunch of new teachers in, and I'm lucky enough to have 2 of them. I have Ms. Downer for anatomy and Mr. Wright for my advisory, and they're both doing exceptionally well. I think everyone is just leaning into the new year, and there's like a rigor that we weren't really able to have last year.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just people are embracing their challenges, and it's really clear. As Ms. Farina said, the dismissal process was rough at first, but as students that participate in that dismissal process every day, it's gotten very, very much better. We're glad to sort of report that it's found its mojo, and it seems to sort of work smoothly every day. So we're really excited about that, and that was great work by Ms. Farina, Mr. Kowalski, and everyone else that was involved.
I think something we're all really excited about is, like, one of our focuses is student voice, obviously, and the new governance structure, which features the student advisory board to the principal that we're going to be implementing. We can't wait to get more student voices from all corners of the building weighing in on everything that we're talking about here and everything that's specific to the high school.
Yeah, and just sort of with the progress of the new 9th grade and 10th grade academies, we're going to be bringing in students, especially to the school committee, just to report to you all that sort of have those experiences, and that it's not sort of just so nice perspective, that it's the perspective of all students. So we're really, really excited about that. And just to Ms. Sprague's question about the scheduling process last year, the biggest thing was just learning how important the student voice is, and tying into the great work that Ms. Farina has done with getting the grant. We're really excited about all that's going to sort of come about. And really sort of the equal parts that students, teachers, administrators, and parents are going to have in this school, especially this school year.
Great, thanks so much.
I have one question, Christy. How will the advisory group be chosen? Is it like by sign up or who
No,
handles the
so
process?
what we are going to do is select student representatives, and not we, like adults, students, are selecting their student representatives from their advisory groups.
Okay.
What we discussed is the concern around like what student elections can sometimes turn into, and that we want all students to have equal opportunity to get involved. And this first year, we are piloting this. So what we're gonna ask is students to indicate if they have interest and then do it as a lottery. And we're gonna see how that goes, and as with everything, we'll evaluate it and make adjustments moving forward if we need to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go on to some other things. In their sort of introductions, people talked a lot about school opening, so I'm not gonna belabor that. I'm gonna jump right into our favorite topic, which is COVID-19. So I'll start with the facts and then some inferences and then go from there. So as of yesterday, here are our COVID numbers, and every meeting I'll share this, and every week it'll be up on our website. Because and I've got different columns, but to date, we've had 6 cases connected to our schools, 2 at Du Bois and 4 at Monument Mountain. All of those cases are out of school cases, so there wasn't, they're currently out of school. At Monument Mountain, there was an impact that sort of rippled through, so there are 12 students right now who are quarantined connected to the 4 cases. To date, there are no cases at Muddy Brook. Okay, so that's where we are. On the bigger thing, the number I'm really looking at these days are the number of cases or the case rate per 7 days. And the magic number that we want to be at or below is 50. And as of earlier today, we're at 152 cases for the past 7 days, and that's in Berkshire, or it's per 100,000 people in Berkshire County. So we're 120,000 people. So that's how that number is calculated. That's on the CDC website. So we're not Texas, we're not Florida, but we're not great either, right? So we'll keep a careful eye on that. I did some outreach to the commissioner's office because lots of people are asking, like, why can't we be remote? And the primary reason we're not remote is because they're telling us to not be remote. And it's also our experience that kids in school are more connected and engaged than kids who are being remote. And also, it's hard to teach simultaneously in person and remotely. The commissioner's been very clear that remote learning is not to happen. There could be very unique circumstances where it does happen, but when I pushed a little bit about this, the thinking is if we, like what happened in Otis is closed or Farmington River is closed for a number of days because they had a higher rate of transmission or infection. What they're being told to do is at the end of the school year, they need to make up those days they closed. They can't do remote as the first option. So that's a sort of slight shift in what's happening. So if for some reason we had to close, then we tack on the number of days we closed at the end of the year. If we went more than 5 or 7 days, then we'd have a conversation with the commissioner at that point.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, sure.
With the kids that are quarantined right now, how, if at all, is learning happening?
Right.
And I think that to me would be, I'm by no means advocating return to remote learning and having that as an option, but I do think it's going to be important to have something in place to make sure learning is happening for the kids that are doing the right thing and staying home to prevent spread.
Yeah, so there are 2 possibilities, right? The kids who are quarantined because they're really sick, and then we're not expecting them to participate in learning, right? They're just sick. And then the second possibility are kids who are quarantined because they've been exposed, but they're actually asymptomatic or feeling pretty good and could engage in learning. So what I've directed the principals to direct the teachers to do is to not provide remote learning to those kids, but to provide them places to connect to the curriculum and work to do to keep them relatively caught up during that time. So for some students, that might be 2 or 3 days. In the worst case situation, it could be 10 calendar days, but probably only 6 or 7 instructional days, depending on when it falls. So teachers and staff will share work with students, but they won't be running remote classes for those students.
And high school focus, just because I'm thinking of my kids and the kind of uproar it creates just to miss one class for orthodontics appointment. But like, is the onus on the student to be following up with the teachers to make that happen? Is it on the teachers?
I think it's reciprocal, right? So there's an expectation that teachers will share information, and then students will hopefully participate in that work. And if they don't or can't or choose not to or are unable to, then teachers will reach out and follow up and check in.
Yeah, the expectation that was laid out at the beginning of the year from most of our teachers was that they were going to be using Canvas for the sole purpose of having all of the work that we were doing in class up there in the order that we were doing it, so that was an easy way to access everything that we had done without necessarily either the student or the teacher having to reach out and communicate about it this time.
Right, and that's like I'm glad that was the expectation that they articulated. That's our aspirational goal. So I can't say definitively in every section of every single class, every last assignment is perfectly there. But in many, many classes it is, and then we'll work to fill in additional gaps. Yeah, Kristen?
Yeah, I also just want to add that at least at the high school, I know we're working on a notification, so teachers will be aware if the student is placed in quarantine, so that if the student isn't submitting anything and they're not in class, the teacher then knows it's not, like, that the absence is due to quarantine, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the kids are exposed, but we're immunized. They don't have to be quarantined, is that right?
Right, and then there's this whole other test and stay protocol, and I'll get to that in a second.
But hopefully we get all the kids as much as possible in.
So is that a CDC recommendation that students that are vaccinated and still have contact are able to stay in school? Is that something?
I don't think there's so many different recommendations. I think it's a DESI recommendation. So influenced by the CDC and the American, Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC, but I don't think it's a DESI's recommendations are informed by the CDC, but I don't think it's a CDC recommendation.
Isn't that 8-page, really easy to follow flow chart?
And it also, they have to be some.
Right. And I'll get to the testing. Yeah, go ahead. Let me I'll answer all your questions in the context of talking about the other things. So, I sent out last week a sort of long memo with a lot of different pieces and an embedded link to consents with also a consent to testing at the schools with also a little video. I'm going to send that out again. To date, we have about 300 consents for people agreeing to participate in the testing, which isn't bad, but it's not where I want it to be. And I'll send out a reminder, and then we'll get to a potential vote on something later, which will reinforce that. But we do want more people to consent to testing so we can start doing the testing. And whether it's catching some folks who are positive and asymptomatic and intervening, or just ensuring that folks who are there are in good shape. We're excited to do that. We're working with the CIC. We had hoped to start it today. We've done everything on our end to get it started. We're waiting for them to do some more things on their end. I heard anecdotally that Lennox started this week, and obviously we haven't started this week. We applied within hours of it being, the window being open, so I just think there's 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts, and the CIC is overwhelmed. But we'll be doing pool testing, which has another better name now, and rapid testing. Unlike last year, you don't have to be symptomatic to do rapid testing. You could do asymptomatic rapid testing. I mentioned we brought on another nurse who's working up to 3 days a week, so that's helping out, and the CIC is going to take an even more active role than they did before. So let me pause. Julian, you have a question?
Yeah, so just for perspective, how many students consented in the spring to pool testing? And do we think this is just a lack of communication to families to sign up, or it's just this is where we were at in the spring and we're just not getting the consent?
I need to go back and look at those numbers. I think right now we're about at the same number we had in the spring. I think I need to make the case again around sort of test and stay. If somebody's unvaccinated and sick, obviously they need to be home, right? But if somebody could be in school, it's better for the student and much more convenient for the family. Imagine having like 3 or 4 kids and each one of them having a close contact or testing positive, and what that would do to your family and life and work schedule. It could be really devastating. So I'll try to make that argument again. I will, in the most polite way, remind people again and again and again and again, and then 50 more times, and hopefully we get the numbers up. Maybe if I get desperate, we'll do a raffle or something, but it's probably against state law to do that.
So the 300 peer is combined students and staff?
It's students and staff.
Are we able to send out paper copies of the consent to the people that haven't consented, just in case it's a lack of sort of a divide in technology?
We are.
Or is it not?
No, it is. The bummer, I'd rather try to do more electronic ones, because if I send out a paper copy, it's sort of complicated. Then I get it and I have to get somebody to enter it. I don't know that that's the answer. The better answer might be inviting people in to enter it, or having people make phone calls and enter it
We
on.
have people with iPads at the pickup line while they're waiting.
The dismissal is such a tenuous thing. Like putting 6 iPads in there, it might all fall
I'm
apart.
so thin, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You can't see my face.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my favorite thing is all the nurses are always listening to our meetings and sending me texts, and the nurses are very pro electronic. So we'll keep working on that and seeing how far we get. It's a lot easier to click than it is to write it all out. So that's the stuff about consents, data, no remote, adding on the end. Hopefully the CIC will have us all going on next Thursday. And I talk to them on a daily basis, and I feel for them because they're overwhelmed. But I think we'll be going.
Peter, I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
So of the 6 cases at the high school, Do we know how many of those students were vaccinated?
I do, but I don't have it in front of me. I think maybe one is like what do we call it, a breakthrough crossover, and the rest were unvaccinated.
And the others that are being quarantined, what's the status with them?
I believe the quarantine people are all unvaccinated.
Okay, just want to get that out there.
Yeah, so I mean, the inference, right, is get vaccinated, please, please, please. Like, the one that really struck me is Oscar De La Hoya, right, the boxer. He's in better shape, arguably, than all of us, and he's in a bed with a ventilator and oxygen, right? If Oscar De La Hoya goes down to this, I don't want to think what happens to the rest of us, right? And I'm preaching to the choir in this room, but people should get vaccinated.
And get the kids.
Right. Yeah.
Have you said previously we were at 94% for the staff. Has that gone up?
I think that's where we're still at. I need to check in with the nurses. It's really interesting. The system to check this isn't efficient. So we literally have to type in 300 people's individual names and birthdays and get a person one at a time, right? And in a better world, I would be able to upload a spreadsheet with all that information that I have and do some sort of fancy VLOOKUP merge and pull it together. But some or multiple people are gonna go one at a time.
Do we have an idea of what those numbers are like for students? I know there's talk of the
Yeah, no, so, it's a good question. So the commissioner said, or has hinted at, if a school community gets above 80% after October 1st, that there may be some latitude about that community not wearing masks, right? And that's interesting. I don't know where we are yet with students. So,
Does the district have that information
again,
about each individual student?
so it's in the state database, and we have to pull it student by student by student. So I think even if you're hyper efficient, maybe you get one student in a minute, but you have to take a break. So you can't get 60 students in an hour, right? Maybe you get 40 in an hour. So I think it's a lot to do. So we'll work towards that. And then there's some people that it's more confusing because they got vaccinated in Connecticut, New York, or some other place. I'm trying to avoid scanning a copy of everybody's vaccination card because I think that's even less efficient. But at some point we might do that. So that's where I'm at. Are you any other questions on this? I'll continue to send guidance out. There's a really interesting article, opinion piece in the Eagle today from Jim Lederer, who's one of the big infectious disease doctors, or do you remember his title is? I don't remember. But works up at BMC, and he makes a very straightforward case around what the different vaccines are, what they do, what the potential impact is, and why it's so valuable. And obviously there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it'd be great to get that cleared up. So the next one, other big complicated one, is the high school intersection and what's going on with Mass DOT. So if you've driven by the high school lately, you'll see that Maximilian Construction is in the process of doing work, and there's heavy equipment on the side of the road next to the greenhouse and the entrance. And the first piece of what they're doing is they're widening the stretch of road there from 3 to 6 feet. And lots of people ask me, it's gonna hit the trees, it's gonna hit the trees. No, it's not gonna hit the trees. it's 3 to 6 feet, right? It's a little bit, it's hardly anything. This is part of this much bigger project. So they'll dig that up, they'll do some sort of base layer, and then they'll pave it. Then the next thing that's gonna happen is that current flashing light with the 35-mile-an-hour school zone thing is gonna be, and the solar panel on it, is gonna be moved down towards the greenhouse more. And then they're gonna install the 2 parts of the interactive warning system. So there'll be one that if you're coming up 7 North on your right, you'll see a sign that says something like, "Be careful, cars entering." And then there'll be another one that actually says, "Car entering." If you're coming out of the driveway, and those will be on a sensor that connects to the driveway that people exit from. If you're in the driveway and trying to exit, there'll be another sign that's connected to oncoming traffic, and it'll warn you, like, don't turn, there's a car coming that's gonna hit you, and that'll be there. And then across the road, there'll be another sign that is also warning people. The other thing that's gonna do, or they're gonna try to do, is there's 2 flashing yellow lights right at the entrance on like an overhanging arm. They're gonna connect those lights to the warning indicator coming out of the high school. So right now, those lights just blink all the time. It's like white noise and you probably don't even notice them. But if they're only blinking when there's a car trying to get out, the thinking is that that'll be an important deterrent or encouragement for people to speed and encouragement for people to slow down. So that's all happening. The design has happened. It's my understanding that those different pieces of equipment are in the process of being ordered. And then really what's going to impact the timing of this is when they're delivered and installed. And they're working really hard on it, and I can't say enough nice things about them. So, any questions on that?
Just to be clear, Peter, if I understand it right, the widening of the road is a separate project that just is increasing the breakdown lanes.
Correct.
And that has nothing to do with our meeting and with our discussion.
Right, it was in the pipeline before our meeting, but what I do think where it overlaps a little bit is if you're pulling out and going left or south on 7, the big complaint was there's a car in the turning lane and there's a car behind it. You focus on the car in the turning lane, which shields the car in the main lane. And as the car turns, then you pull out into a car, right? Part of the plan is to create some space between the turning lane and the main lane. And I actually think they're taking advantage of these extra 3 to 5 feet to create some, like they're not putting up a yellow divider, but they're painting a divider. So I think it'll create some separation so it'll be easier to see the northbound car as you're turning left. Yes.
Is this work going to be done simultaneously with the widening of the road, or is this just a false hope, seeing all the work trucks and they're just widening the road and then it'll be another year before our work gets done? Or is it going to get done now? Do we know?
Yeah, what I was trying to say was that all the work's in process,
Okay.
but the thing that's most likely to hold it up is the delivery of the equipment, right? So like, let me give you a parallel example. My dishwasher's not doing so well, so I ordered one, and I like begged them when I'd get it. We're like loosely holding Thanksgiving as the time, and I ordered it 3 weeks ago, right? So there are all sorts of supply issues around COVID. What would be terrible is if the equipment was delayed and then it gets so cold that the ground is too hard to put something in. I think that's the worst case scenario. I think the better case scenario is we get the equipment in a couple months and then get it in the ground before the ground's wet. Yeah, so I can't, they don't know, so like, if I knew, I'd tell you, they don't know.
Yeah, no, so
right?
just the work that we're seeing now is not necessarily this work now, this is just sort of.
The widening of the road.
Yeah, because suddenly it seemed like everything was happening very quickly, very impressed, but now I'm realizing that
Yeah.
that might have been in the works for a few years.
Yeah. No, I mean, like,
You actually thought the bureaucracy was working, huh?
you're in your teens.
I was in-
You'll become old and jaded like Bill and I in a couple more decades. So that's what's going on with that. And then Christy spoke, I'll move to the next topic, the arrival and dismissal challenges. So first couple days were rough. We worked really hard. Thanks to the bus company who pivoted a lot around this. Thanks to Chief Storty from Great Barrington and Chief Bentley from Stockbridge. They've been really good with coverage. Even the morning construction had the possibility to upset the apple cart, and on most days they've had 2 officers there, and the people from Maximilian have been good about doing work way off the road at arrival times, and then actually finishing up for the day 20 minutes before dismissal. So what could have had a huge impact on us has not had a huge impact on us. So I think that's good. And then parents and students for figuring it out and making it work. Christy, did I miss anybody on that list of people we want to thank?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, so.
I know that down at in between like the middle and elementary school, we have taught coach directing traffic a lot of times.
Uh-huh.
I think, I don't know if that's of his own volition or per the request of someone else, but every time we drive by, my mom's, thank God Tom is here.
Yeah.
So shout out to.
Yeah, that's good too. I mean, thankfully, and he's been doing that for years.
Nice music.
Yeah, the Muddy Brook situation has been easier historically. There's one other thing that we may bring back to buildings and grounds, and Jason, we've talked about this a dozen times, but the parents who choose to not use the parking lot and use the side of Monument Valley Road are themselves getting a good deal because it's a quick walk into the building, but they're making it very difficult for cars that are going into the middle school, going or leaving the middle school. And we talked about like putting boulders there or split rail fencing or something, but if there's, and I don't think this is gonna happen for a little while, if there's a giant event at the middle school, at the elementary school, we need the side of the roads as like overflow parking, because there's not enough parking. But on a day-to-day basis, there are almost always enough spots that if people went the extra 100 yards and drove in, they could get a spot. They just might have to walk 200 yards instead of 20 yards. So we probably have to revisit that and think what we want to do there.
Yes, I mean, when we went over this over the 12 previous times in my 7 years, it's either all or nothing. We either put no parking signs up, and then it's 365, 24/7, where even on a concert, the police will take it.
Right.
So it's like an all or nothing. We can't just have no parking there, and then, but for 2 or 3 days a week, we have a concert. Unfortunately, that was the police chief said. And then as far as boulders or et cetera, it's, we either put them there or we don't. Just anecdotally speaking, I mean, it definitely seems worse this year as far as more parents deciding to park and walk their kids in rather than go in the pickup queue, or the drop-off queue. I'm wondering if it's just, the first week or two of school, after a couple of weeks of walking in, they'll be sick of it, or the weather gets worse, and they'll want to actually get in the driving queue. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. It definitely seems to be worse this year than it was at any time in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the obvious thing is fewer people are riding the buses because of COVID. So there are more people driving, so it puts more pressure on a relatively small space. We do have a new chief, since the last time we talked about this, so we could have, I, like you, have had the conversation a dozen times, but we could have it one more time with the new chief.
And I know we've gone back and forth. I mean, there's some schools, Richmond, Lennox, where there is no option to park or walk. I mean, you can go in and pick up and drop off you, or you don't drop them off, you ride a bus. And so, I mean, again, I don't wanna, bird cage with this type of subject right off the bat, but, it's something that we can look at again as far as, how we want to handle that. Because I do agree there, it appears to be an accident waiting to happen with all the kids and parents getting off right on Mine Valley Road. Crossing, not on the sidewalk, but just going, straight across the road.
And also it becomes mud in the spring on that side.
Yeah, I mean,
The mud holes, and ruins, as Rich is always saying, we have a nice area there. And by the spring, it looks like it's a, tractor festival or something.
Right.
But again, just to rehash, I mean, we don't have nearly enough parking spaces, so we, with the staff and everything there, we don't have nearly enough for parents to be able to park there, drop off, and pick up. And we're limited as far as where we can pave over the grass, either the field, because we don't own any land further, we've got the direction to the south, it's right into the NRC land, and then the swampland. So we're kind of hemmed in as far as what we can do once we pave over the soccer field trails. We don't want to do.
Right.
Obviously, this is not the time for this, but whenever the Harvest Festival happens, they put up all these different stakes all around stop groups with just a laminated piece of paper that says no parking. And if we were to put so many up that no one can fit their car in there, people get the message. Or we can't just print our own sign that says no parking unless otherwise posted, right? So then there's that sort of on concert days or specific days, parking is allowed. I don't know. I feel like we're the school district, we can make our own sign, right?
It's a town road, we can't take your own.
Yeah. I like your creativity.
I mean, there is the option of putting things like bales of hay. Which are somewhat movable.
But we'll put it out and look for a 13th time and see if we got new ideas. And you never know.
There's a lot of topics we talk about more than one.
All right, so moving along, and I think this one is easy. And Zoe already made the argument. Every once in a while, we have a sport that's so popular that we need another assistant coach. There are many young women running cross country. We'd like to request the school committee's permission to fund an additional assistant coach for cross country. It's a good thing, and I strongly recommend you vote to do so.
Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we want to limit this to 1 year or give it to the
Well,
administration, so you don't have to keep coming back? Because hopefully we'll need it for a long time.
Can Carl build it into the budget for next year, or is this?
Yeah, no, we can definitely build into the budget. I think what we should do is, if conversely, the boys team, I think, has 12 people on it. If the numbers are such, we'll add additional assistant coaches, and if the numbers are such, we'll take them away. We kicked around the idea of trying to create like the perfect ratio, but it's sort of flawed because some sports, the ratio needs to be different, right? Cross country, there's 37 young women spread across 3 miles, right? Or really 1.5 miles, but spread. And it warrants a different ratio than volleyball, which is everybody in a gym, or for that matter, track, which is people spread out, but in a pretty contained place.
Bonnie, you have a question?
Yeah, so is this just gonna be where we're gonna check it out? Because I know with football and baseball, we're allotted so many coaches, and then the booster clubs are actually paying for the additional coaches.
Right. The difference here, Bonnie, is when we allow booster clubs to do it, it's because we think we have the right number of coaches,
Yeah.
but they can be use another coach, like in football, an offensive coach, a defensive, but it's not necessary for safety or coaching. Here, it's because of the numbers, it's necessary to have for the team.
Okay, so they just have one coach now, so because the squad is so big, they need to have additional just to, okay, no, I get it.
And from a historical perspective, different times the swim team's been very small, and then one year it got very big, and from a safety perspective, it made sense to have a coach and an assistant coach, and we've kept that. The other sports, soccer has always had a coach and an assistant coach. Football's always had at least a coach and an assistant coach, and sometimes a third coach. I think sometimes soccer's had 3 coaches.
I think the Booster Club is paid for.
Right.
Okay, so we have a motion by Jason, a second by Bill. It's a roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
And I vote aye, it's unanimous.
Okay.
Can I just ask, when we talk about the process, I would personally like to see kind of a more formal process with this, as someone who has advocated on behalf of an activity, where the rules have not been hard and fast, and it's been very difficult to get to a position. And so I understand we're saying we're just deciding numbers, so I would just like to see a clearly laid out process. I would completely understand that ratios aren't hard and fast and kind of have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. But I do feel a little bit like it's becoming the squeaky wheel or somebody who understands.
Maybe in the co-curricular guidelines, the process, we'll have to look at it, because there's a series of guidelines that we have that are available that may have the process. And really, the process is a recommendation from the athletic director and the superintendent. I mean, it should end up with the school committee if they have, if they recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 things. I agree with you, Corey. We could do a better job of sort of establishing parameters and a process for a decision. I know Christie's going to convene a little ad hoc committee in part to look at the MIAA reconfiguration thing and some of the impact of that. And we could look, we do this pretty well for athletics. I don't know if we do it as well, or I'm going to say more directly. We don't do it as well for some activities.
Yeah, I don't think it's come to the school committee at all.
Right. Okay. So the next one, and this I think is again a fairly straightforward argument to make. It's very hard to hire our lowest paid employees, in large part because they're our lowest paid employees. And the 2 particular groups that impacts are new food service employees and paraprofessionals. As we start the school year, we have 6 or 7 empty paraprofessional positions that we've been unable to fill. And a few, maybe 3, Sharon, food service positions. So what I shared in the memo is a recommendation that Sharon and I worked on, and then I consulted with the 2 bargaining groups about this, but to move the starting rate for paraprofessionals from $4.10 to $15.
$14.
Yeah, $14.10 to $15. And for people in their second year, from $14.86 to $15.25, and people in their third year from $15.66 to $15.75. This doesn't totally solve the problem. It's a step towards solving the problem, and we'll likely come back to the negotiating team or have a negotiating team meeting about potential future increases. What's hard is you drive by Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's or whatever, and they're paying the rate that I'm asking you to change this to. Now, our insurance is a little better, and I'd like to think our working conditions are a little better. But it's hard to recruit people, so I'm making this recommendation. It's really unusual, right, to come to the school committee in the middle of a contract and say, what we have in there is not enough. It would have gone up slowly over time, tied to the increase in minimum wage, but the combination of cost of living, inflation, and all the rest of this, it's clear as day that we need to, in my mind, do this. Food service is really only impacting one person, and that's there. So,
Do I have a motion to accept this recommendation?
Make a motion to accept the recommendation?
Second.
So I have a motion by Bill, a second by Corey. Any discussion?
I have a question. Do you think this is gonna be enough? Because I mean, you know, historically, I mean, I think para positions, substitute, are critical, but they're sometimes overlooked, except when we don't have enough of them. So, do you think, I mean, I guess it's impossible to tell, but do you think this will be enough to attract them? And number two, to follow up on this, with the attrition of all the other ones, did the vaccine mandate, do you know if that had any effect on people leaving, or was that not an issue? Just out of curiosity.
I want to be very careful and not identify the role. I think the vaccine mandate impacted 2 people, but across different groups.
Okay. Not a significant issue.
No, not a significant one. So my only, like, I could sort of play the bidding game, and you could say 15 is not going to do it, let's vote on 16. And part of me would like to do that, but my fear is what we came up with addresses it for the people on the first 3 steps. If we went too high, then it's impacting like the next 6 steps, and then it'll ripple through everything. So our recommendation is find one for now. And I think in the context of, look, we're trying to put a Band-Aid on it. In the context of a bigger conversation with the negotiations team, we might end up with something more significant. But I'm reluctant to do that right now because the ripple effect will be much bigger. All right, so we did the analysis. We can do this for the people in their first 3 years. If we went instead of to 15 to 16, then it impacts the second and third step people, plus probably the 4th, 5th, and 6th. And then if you're impacting the 6th, then it might impact the 7th and 8th. So that's a much bigger to do. But I like the spirit of that, and the negotiation team could take a couple meetings to analyze that all and come up with something.
Are there other additional opportunities within the district that would be above and beyond the school day that by being employed by the district, the parents would be allowed to opt into for additional income?
Yes, yeah, so I mean, there are a couple ones. There are different levels. So the paras, the base pay, and then there are 2 levels of facilitator pay. So that could add somewhere between an extra $1 an hour to, at the highest end, I think, $5 an hour, right? So then somebody's making $20 an hour. That's very competitive. So those are possibilities. We always have opportunities, or often have opportunities for coaching. There's several programs that we run as our part of our after school or out of school time. So there are opportunities there. So potentially somebody could do quite a bit to.
I feel like those would be important things to be highlighting in addition to whatever gets voted on tonight.
Right.
In terms of recruiting, to show that this is a first step and an entryway into a situation where there are other opportunities as well.
No, I think so. And the other thing we've been talking a lot about is creating a career pathway. So some people want to be paras for their whole career, and that's wonderful. And some people want to use it as a stepping stone to becoming a teacher, and that could be wonderful too. Right? And the range of people that are choosing to be paras is really interesting. So there are people, I think there's a para with a master's degree, but a lot of them with college degrees, and then there are people with high school degrees and community college degrees. So it's a wide range of people, and we're really dependent on them. They play really significant roles, and some of them work with our youngest kids, but the others often work with our neediest kids. So they're important.
The seven, was it seven that you said that we were starting down at the beginning of the year? We were down 7 paraprofessionals, or there were 7 spots?
Yes.
Yeah, so does that include the 4 that have now resigned, or is that 4 additional spots that we're now missing
I think you're,
on the personnel report?
oh, no, I think, sorry. I think we've replaced some of those already.
So we have a motion and a second, it's a roll call vote. Ian,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Sean,
I think he's muted.
Aye. Yes.
thank you. Bonnie,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Cory,
Aye.
and I, it's a unanimous vote.
Okay, so then there's one last one that I'd like to give you a little context on. I'd like to make a recommendation that students, a condition of participating in extracurricular activities is for students to first participate in weekly testing. I've spoken with our attorney about this, and the thinking is that I can't compel people to test to come to school because it's their opportunity to come to school. But extracurricular activities are not an expectation, but a privilege. And that one way to drive up our testing percentage is to compel people who are planning to participate in extracurricular activities to consent to testing.
Would that include vaccinated students?
As it stands now, yes, but there's sort of a debate at the state level about whether it makes sense for vaccinated students to participate in pool testing or not. And that's not resolved, so I'm not addressing that now. Maybe in the future, vaccinated students would not have to participate in pool testing, but all I'm asking now is that people participate in testing to participate in extracurricular activities.
I believe we have a formal motion.
Yes.
Have that
Can I
motion?
read the motion?
Yes,
I move to mandate that students participate in weekly school-based COVID-19 testing to be able to engage in extracurricular activities.
do I have a second? So it's a motion and a second. Cory made the motion, Ann made the second. Discussion.
What do we mean specifically by extracurricular activities? Is this just for athletics, contact, extracurricular activities, or any groups that are meeting outside of school?
I think in my mind, it's a very wide net.
Still, does this, I don't know, are we just using the term extracurricular to mandate more people to do testing, or is it specifically to stop the spread?
It's both. And there is a definition of extracurricular in somewhere that we have. And
Yeah,
it is.
I think that I can look up the formal definition, but I think it's, if the high school day is effectively 8 or 7:55 to 2:45. It's anything before school or after school.
And what's just the timeline, if this is voted on tonight and approved, when does this go into effect? Because my fear is there's been a group of mine and students that participate in Lennox athletics, and they're not allowed to participate because our COVID testing starts on Thursday. So does this mean athletes can't participate until Thursday, or are we gonna just put a timeline that this goes into effect once our first sort of period of COVID testing goes into, right?
I think this is a process question, and the process is as soon as we can get it set up, we'll do it.
Right, so I don't, like, it's not like we're the school committee to vote to approve this. I'm not banning everybody tomorrow from doing anything. My hope and expectation would be that if we're able to start testing next Thursday, that people consent and participate in that.
So is this pool testing so just to rehash the pool testing, so how many kids are gonna be in each pool? And if there's a positive in that pool, what's the time frame for all the asymptomatic? So if the pool tests positive and you're asymptomatic and vaccinated, then you automatically are
Then you jump
okay unless you're symptomatic, you become symptomatic.
No, then you jump into the test and stay protocol, right? And Christy, do you want to talk to this?
Even if you're vaccinated, so about the test and stay was not for vaccinated, unsymptomatic people.
So the one thing I would like to share about pool testing that is different when we implement it next week is that we have signed up to do the 2 swab pool testing this year, meaning everyone who signs up for pool testing gets swabbed twice. One swab goes into the pool, the other swab goes into an individual vial that is labeled with the individual's name and date of birth. If a pool comes back positive, then automatically all of the individual tests will go. So we should be able to identify the individual positive more quickly than we did last year, because last year what had to happen was everyone had to get sent from the pool to get tested. Once we identify the positive, then we still have to do all of the contact tracing. Contact tracing, we identify close contacts. Close contacts don't matter whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. However, whether or not you have to quarantine or participate in test and stay matters whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So I think a lot of this goes back to the residents of people pool testing in the first place, in the general sense, is, kids that miss so much school that a parent doesn't want to needlessly have their kid miss even 1, 2, or 3 days. So let's say pool testing, someone comes back positive. The next day, all those kids in the pool are quarantined until each one of their individual tests. Then we swab at the same time, but we know the lab, and sometimes it can be 2 or 3 days, other times the labs are busy. Maybe 4 or 5, we know.
My understanding is the reason we chose Thursday is that we are hoping that those results will come back on Friday or going into the weekend, so that then the individual tests will come back before school on Monday, so that we could start the identification process if there's anyone that either has to quarantine or participate in test and stay, which would mean I'm an individual who has to quarantine, but now instead of choosing quarantine, I'm choosing to come to school, go to the nurse's office, and get swabbed.
And so are they rapid tests?
A rapid
Yes.
test, yes.
So if Thursday they get tested, they come that Friday, they theoretically get a rapid test that Friday or Monday?
The rapid test wouldn't happen likely until Monday or Tuesday when we get to the post-contact identification.
Okay. And so this, I guess, follows up on, we're not set up at the test and stay yet until hopefully next Thursday, is that?
I think it's gonna, I'm very confident it'll happen next Thursday. It's not really in my control,
But yeah, no,
but I talked to her yesterday, I emailed and talked to her today. I think we're gonna be in good shape.
For good reason, but it's an intense process of identification and.
But the 2 swab in theory helps us because it impacts less people because you can get to the positive quicker.
It speeds up the ability to identify close contact, yes.
And how big are the pools?
I think they like them to be like 10 to 12. I think sometimes they're smaller and sometimes they're a little bigger, but I think that's where they love to do it.
So just to get back, so, because from reading the DESI website, the test, if you're a close contact and you're vaccinated and you're asymptomatic, that does not require testing to stay, that just requires you to be vigilant about becoming symptomatic, is that right? So if you're part of the pool testing, and that pool test becomes positive, then you can't stay unsymptomatic and vaccinated, you still have to be tested. Is that correct?
Except that we already have your individual
Right.
swab that will be tested.
Right, but until that comes back, you're
Considered part of the positive pool, correct?
But the win on this is the quarantine then isn't necessarily for 10 days, but it might be one.
And this is only requiring participation, meaning that if a student misses the weekly pool test because they're out for a doctor's appointment or an orthodontist appointment, they're still okay to participate in extracurriculars for that week until the next test, or are they pulled out of extracurriculars? Or is there an option to be tested by the nurses in school, or is it on their own responsibility to be tested at a CDS or something like that? Like how does that work? If the student misses the pool testing, or is that not even applicable? And this is simply stating that if you're in an extracurricular, you must participate.
In the course of the year, there are probably 37 Thursdays that we have school. If somebody misses 1 or 2 Thursdays, I don't think it's going to be an issue. If somebody misses 5+ Thursdays, then we're going to have a deep dive into the data and some careful conversations, right? So the goal is not to exclude people from participation in extracurriculars. The goal is to encourage people to opt in to testing and to try to keep a safe environment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Thank you. Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
So it's a unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. I think this will help, and then I'll do everything I can in my power to make a clear argument why it's a good idea, to try to answer some of those questions. Does signing up for pool testing set me up to be quarantined indefinitely? Is that a bad idea? To everybody's satisfaction.
Subcommittee reports. Policy is not met. Buildings and grounds.
Has not met.
Superintendent's evaluation, no. Technology is not met. Finance is not met. And district consolidation. Any old or new business before the committee? Any public comment? And feel free to raise your hand electronically. Seeing none, by unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
I have, yes.